The Indiana Hoosiers are your 2025 national champions in college football. That is something that I do not think many people were expecting to say, even headed into this season after the Hoosiers made the playoffs the year prior. And if you said that 2 years ago, people would have thought you were certifiably insane. Some people think that Indiana winning a national title sort of opens the door up to a bunch of other programs that could potentially win a title because all conventional logic and wisdom that college football history tells us is that this should have been impossible. But maybe it is possible now. So, in today's video, I thought we could go over some of the other programs that could win a national title just like Indiana and could be the next Indiana. So, first, in order to understand the full context, we got to talk about how absurd it was that the Hoosiers won a national title. If you look at them as a program, they were horrible historically. They had zero national titles, zero national title game appearances, zero Heisman winners, an all-time winning percentage of just 43%, which is good enough for 125th in the FBS, which, by the way, is only better than like 11 teams and only better than one power conference team. Historically, they were awful. They are the scum on your shoe in the Big Ten, a team that you're happy is on your schedule because it means a free win in conference. They only had 3 conference titles all time, a bowl record of 3-11 prior to this season, and their only 10-win season prior to Curt Cignetti taking over in 2024. Never. They haven't had any. So just unbelievable stuff. And the fact that this program was able to ascend so rapidly, I mean, that's just insane on top of it all. But just understanding the context of where this program was is very important. So we ask the question, who could be the next Indiana? Well, before we get into actually answering that, I think it's important to establish what it would mean specifically to be the next Indiana and the historical things you would need to qualify under, basically, the set of circumstances. And so the key aspects to Indiana's ascension in just a short 2-year period is several things. The first thing is, as a program, historically being poverty. And that's something that in history we have been told, if you are poverty as a program, you will never win a national title. You will never ascend. You will never be there. It just does not happen. And yet it did. They have a large alumni base. In fact, Indiana has the largest alumni base in the entire country. And to me, that's what makes this sustainable for them, is they have the support. So in order to be the next Indiana and to have something sustainable going forward, you probably need a sustainable and a large alumni base on top of that. They have great funding via TV revenue. The Big Ten TV revenue deal got them a ton of money all of a sudden when the Big Ten restructured and added the West Coast schools. And that was a huge differentiator for the Hoosiers that allowed them to actually be able to invest. They have an exciting new head coach. This is something that isn't going to eliminate a ton of programs because they could get an exciting new head coach if we're talking about like the next 5 to 10 years becoming the next Indiana. And then also nobody would see this coming. That's what makes this video a little bit of a paradox, is if I correctly identify who could be the next Indiana, it almost makes them not able to be the next Indiana because nobody was guessing that Indiana would do what they're doing. So it's going to be interesting to talk about, but what I want to do is I want to talk about the next, or the 10 programs that could be the next Indiana in order of who sort of qualifies the most based on these qualities. Before we get into that list, though, there's a lot of programs that get thrown out there as programs that could be the next Indiana. And for the most part, I think people pick programs that are too good. Some of the ones that I commonly hear are on this slide here, but they're historically too successful to even think about considering to be in Indiana. Like people say like, oh, well, Colorado. Colorado has a national title fairly recently, within the last 30 years. They don't qualify. Georgia Tech, they have a national title, at least one, I'm pretty sure, in their history, probably multiple. Pitt's claimed a couple national titles. Kansas State, they've won several conference titles. They had a ton of success in the Snyder era recently. Arkansas, even historically, Arkansas is better than what would be required to be considered for this list. So there's just a lot of programs that people toss around without fully realizing just how poverty Indiana was. And to be the next Indiana, you've got to be really, really bad. And so that takes us to this list of 10 programs that could be the next Indiana. And we'll start at number 10. Number 10 is going to be Wake Forest. The Demon Deacons in the ACC are the only power conference program that has a worse record all time than Indiana. So the poverty, historically garbage aspect of things, Wake Forest is absolutely nailing here. You talk about recent success that might disqualify them. They don't really have a ton of recent success. Dave Clawson took them through a couple solid years, but that's arguably one of their most successful stretches in program history, and it pretty much peaked with them making an ACC title game and not even winning it. So they certainly qualify there. In terms of an alumni base, it's not as extensive as you might want to see, but they are in a power conference. They've got decent funding, and for that reason, they qualify under a few of those. I think, honestly, the biggest way Wake Forest qualifies as the potential next Indiana is because of how far off the radar they are. They aren't being mentioned in many conversations. And so if Wake Forest wins a national title in 2 years out of nowhere, it would qualify simply because they've got the historically poverty aspect, and then nobody is seeing them coming. That's kind of why they're at number 10, because it feels like it's really not very feasible that they do it, because they don't meet the criteria in certain areas like funding. They do have an exciting young coach in Jake Dickert, so maybe that's working in their favor, but feels like it's a bit of a stretch. At number 9 is going to be NC State. We're staying in the state of North Carolina. There are a lot of similarities between these two programs. NC State is just a little bit better historically than Wake Forest, but still not great. They have a head coach currently in Dave Doran. That's not a young, exciting head coach, but obviously, we're talking about down the line here, so that could change, especially as the program grows kind of weary of him. Recent program success has been all right, but they can't really clear like that 8 or 9 win mark, so it hasn't been so successful to disqualify them from becoming the next Indiana. And they do have a decent backing. They have a pretty large alumni base in the state of North Carolina, so there are some aspects and things that you could look at and say, yeah, NC State absolutely could be in that conversation. At number 8, we've got Northwestern. The Wildcats are a program that checks a lot of the boxes, surprisingly, actually, because they have a very large alumni base. They're one of those legacy Big Ten schools that has quite a bit of fans out there that maybe aren't quite activated as fans right now, kind of similar to what Indiana was feeling like just a couple of years ago before they had success. You talk about recent success. I mean, the pinnacle of Northwestern football was Pat Fitzgerald getting them to a couple of Big Ten titles. They lose those. Historically, they are poverty enough to qualify here. To me, I think the single biggest thing working against Northwestern football is the fact that their academic standards are pretty dang high, and that just puts them at a very, very big disadvantage in terms of trying to ascend. But Indiana is the case study within the Big Ten, so the fact that they're in the Big Ten, I think, works in their favor in creating maybe a path to them somehow being the next team to break through. Then we've got Purdue. Purdue checks a ton of the boxes because they are within the state of Indiana. They are also a team that is in the Big Ten. They are historically not great at all, and there's just a lot there. They also have a pretty big alumni base as well, so they are up there with Indiana in a lot of those aspects. The only thing that might discourage me from picking a Purdue or banking on a Purdue is it feels like Indiana's ascension within the same state might actually hurt the Boilermakers in terms of their investment and how many people they can get to back them, because Indiana is already swooping up a ton of that momentum, and it always felt like the Hoosiers were maybe more of a team tied to the state of Indiana now, like they're almost Indiana's team. Maybe that works and it's iron sharpens iron, and Purdue follows suit and their investment really increases and improves because they do have a large alumni base of their own, but to me, doesn't feel like that's exactly what's happening. It feels like basketball is a little bit more of a priority for Purdue. At number 6, we've got our first SEC program on here, and the SEC is the elephant in the room here because we saw somebody that was in the gutter of the Big Ten in Indiana rise and ascend to the top, and Mississippi State would be a team and a program from the gutter in the SEC rising to the top. The thing that's working against Mississippi State is they are really in the gutter, and there is a lot of investment that is occurring from other programs in the SEC that probably outpaces Mississippi State, but hey, that's what would make them come out of nowhere and qualify them for a lot of other things here. But overall, Mississippi State, I do think, just checks some of those boxes. Historically, they're not too great. They've got a lot of fans that are loyal to them and that would definitely support them if they had success. We saw the Dak Prescott era, it's probably close to a decade ago now under Dan Mullen, and we've seen some potential success with this program. So maybe they're a little bit closer than we give them credit for. Next up at number 5, we've got our third Big Ten team on this list, which is going to be the Maryland Terrapins, another team in the Big Ten that makes a ton of sense. They're actually a relatively recent Big Ten addition. When you talk about when they were added in rounds of realignment, it was like 2014 or 2013 or something like that. And so with them being added, they've been having that money infused into the program. They have the checks rolling in, and they actually have a fairly large alumni base, and they're located in an area that is a pretty populated area and a pretty popular area of the country, right near Washington, D.C. So for that reason, Maryland has a ton of potential, and it's one of the reasons that the Big Ten added them in the first place. Right now, they're seen as one of the bottom teams of the conference. They don't have much historical success to bank on or lean on, and for that reason, Maryland's a very attractive candidate to be the next Indiana. And next up, we've got another SEC program in South Carolina. And I really like South Carolina for a lot of reasons. I'd say the biggest thing working against South Carolina and not putting them higher on this list is definitely the fact that they've actually had a decent amount of relatively recent success. You talk about all of those like 11-win seasons they were able to rip off, those like top 15 to 10 finishes. For a while, South Carolina was a pretty respectable program in the SEC recently, which just reduces some of the shock value of them ascending. I mean, not this year, but the year prior, we saw them as a program that was in the top 25 for a good chunk of the season and battling. So as a program, maybe they're a little bit higher up than what would be necessary. Historically speaking, they are pretty awful, and that would qualify. And then you talk about the investment that's there. You talk about the fan base that's also there. Those things are all there for South Carolina. And so for that reason, they would be like the Indiana of the SEC. Next up, though, we have Vanderbilt, which is very similar to South Carolina in a lot of ways. And honestly, the one thing that I would say gives them a leg up over South Carolina right now is A, they're even more historically poverty, which puts them even lower on the rung. But B, the fact that we've already kind of seen them take a step forward. Like this last year, they almost had like a 2024 Indiana-esque season. You win 10 games for the first time in a very long time in your program's history and put yourselves in a great spot. Maybe they're already on stepping stone one of the two-step Indiana plan under Clark Lee, and that literally could be happening. Like, if Vanderbilt were to take another massive leap forward next year, just like Indiana did, and win a national title, it was right in front of us. Vanderbilt is the next Indiana, and you could very easily call them the Indiana of the SEC because of where they rank and rate historically within that conference. So, with Vanderbilt, we could already see them 50% of the way there. And I think for me, that's what puts Vandy a little bit higher. I know some people might look at the success they had in 2025 and say that disqualifies them. But to me, it doesn't, because Indiana's was a 2-year process. So it could just be that Vanderbilt's overlaps with Indiana. And that's why I have the Commodores at number 3. Number 2 is going to be Rutgers. Rutgers, the Scarlet Knights, invented football. So this one just feels very appropriate for so many reasons as a program that might ascend. They've always felt like a very similar genre of a team and a program to Indiana. They have a very large alumni network and base. The funding is there in the Big Ten. They are in the Big Ten. And it's just a place and a market that you just feel like could easily be tapped into to create a tidal wave that feels as overwhelming as Indiana's ascension was. The key ingredient they don't have right now is an exciting young head coach. They have Greg Schiano. He's a legacy coach for them, but maybe they make that move. Maybe they're one hire away from facilitating what it would take to ascend to that level. So Rutgers, I think, absolutely has to be in this conversation. But this takes us to the number 1 program that I think could be the next Indiana. And for me, that's going to be Kentucky, another program from the SEC. Kentucky has always been a basketball school and has always really sucked at football. And recently, they did have some successful years under Stoops, and Stoops was able to do a lot of good stuff with them. But recently, Stoops getting fired, no longer the head coach there, could be a passing of the torch moment and a chance for Will Stein to lead Kentucky into a new era. And obviously, Will Stein's a little bit different than Kurt Cignetti because he doesn't have the head coaching experience that Cignetti had, but maybe he can unlock something. Kentucky's investment is pretty elite, actually. They invest pretty heavily into their program, and they're doing more so under Will Stein. I think we saw that with the portal class. And so it feels to me like Kentucky could be maybe that type of program to make it happen. And I know it sounds like I'm beating a dead horse because the logic is similar for a lot of these teams, but you're talking about the funding. You're talking about being in the SEC, the TV revenue. You're talking about historically being poverty. You're talking about a program that is just right there in the SEC. And we've seen some case studies in the last 20 or so years of them showing us a little bit of life. And so you just wonder what they're capable of in a new era. To me, what feels like it would be the most quote-unquote realistic of a program becoming the next Indiana, to me that feels like Kentucky, and it screams Kentucky. To me, Kentucky just makes way too much sense as the next Indiana. I think them winning it would be shocking and just completely bewildering, but it would make at least like a smidgen of sense to the point where that would be the case. So there it is, the 10 programs that could be the next Indiana. This is, of course, all speculation. This video might sound super stupid to some because I'm talking like almost entirely in hypotheticals, and we're talking about like programs that could basically come out of nowhere to do something, and there's almost not a ton of skill in doing that. So maybe some of you didn't enjoy this video, but Indiana's run was so unbelievable that I just had to come on here and talk about it. So let me know down in the comments, what are some programs that you think could be the next Indiana? I'll link the Discord down in the bio. If you haven't already joined the Discord, it's a great place to facilitate college football discussion and connect with a lot of people that like the same things you do. So I'll have that in there. And then also a very exciting announcement on Sunday. We will be having a very new just thing for the channel. I don't know if I want to completely spoil what it is, but if you made it this far in the video, maybe you deserve to know. Anyways, I'm not going to do that. I won't spoil it. But I really appreciate you guys for watching this, and I will see you guys on Sunday.